Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm Kim Brace with Election Data Services. I apologize, I am up here behind the monitors up here, so, but I'm driving the bus right now. So, but we've got lots to show you and talk about. First off, as I said, discussion-wise, we'll talk about an overview of the redistricting process. We're going to do an overview of some of the statewide population shifts that we're seeing in the census data that we've just received a month or so ago. I want to do some in-depth look at Newport County and some of what your neighbors are telling the Census Bureau and showing some of that information. I want to show you some of the online tools for public input in the redistricting process. Both our redistricting.org website, which is up and running for everybody, our communities of interest. You'll be able to get on board our website and create your ideas of what communities of interest are with your neighborhoods or your area of concern. And also we'll be unveiling soon being able to draw district plan ideas that you can do from your home.
Kim, let me interrupt you for a minute. Mr. Clerk, if you just record that Rep. Diaz is now with us. Sorry, Kim, you may proceed.
And then we want to hear from you. We are very interested in taking public testimony tonight. So, in terms of redistricting overview, when one does redistricting, there's several different factors that you need to take into account. Clearly, the population is most paramount. The census is conducted for the purposes of redistricting. It was generated in 1790 when the Founding Fathers created the way of dealing with people versus states in this country. The House of Representatives is based upon number of people, and they recognize that number of people change frequently, and so they set in place a decennial census. And that census is what continues to drive the whole process every 10 years. So it's important to have those population numbers, and that's what we have now received for 2020, and we'll be able to show you some of what we're seeing in that. So the census data is the most important things. But there are other things that come into play in terms of redistricting. The law is important. The courts have told us that we need to be careful when we draw districts. We need to draw districts that are fairly equal in population. How equal is dependent upon what level of districts you're creating. If you're looking at what the courts have told us is that if you're looking at congressional districts, they need to be very, very equal. In fact, about 38, 39 of the states ended up having last decade the deviation of 1 person or 0 people. Of all the people that made up a congressional district, most states ended up creating them to be absolutely equal. And so the courts have pushed us in that direction. But they've also recognized that while congressional districts are important, there is a lot more latitude, and they have accepted for state legislative districts. And so generally what we have is we have an overall 10% deviation window that we need to get within, which is 5% above the ideal district size and 5% below. And if we can get the districts into that window, then presumably in the court of law, that is at least presumably sacrosanct and good. Now, there could be problems in other factors besides 1 person, 1 vote, and so it's not a guarantee, but you need to first off at least get your districts close to ideal. Now, in the state of Rhode Island, ideal is a real small number. So an overall 5% or above and below in Rhode Island is a lot different than in California or in other large states. And so we, in essence, here in Rhode Island, have a really pretty narrow window that we need to look towards. And that's what we'll be looking at through the whole redistricting process. Making districts equal and trying to then reflect, second tier is reflecting minority voting strength. Courts have said that the Voting Rights Act is the second tier most important thing to take into account. So we will be looking at that from the standpoint of drawing districts and analyzing districts. And so the Voting Rights Act is the other key component. What I always say is that the third component to be taking a look at is kind of everything else. It is the kitchen sink. It is what your state constitution might call for, other factors that come into play, practices in terms of reflecting county and town boundaries. For example, townships and town boundaries, cities here in Rhode Island are very important. And so that's another factor that we up here in Rhode Island take into account. So there's a lot of different things, neighborhoods and communities of interest. And what you'll see later on is how we would like to find out from you your ideas of community of interest. And so we've developed a tool that is interactive on the web so that you can draw your communities of interest. I am up here, guys. I'm sorry about that, but it's kind of hard to not be able to see you. Sorry about that. So the factors of trying to get input is what we're looking for. So that's a broad overview from the redistricting side. It happens every 10 years. We now have the data for the purposes of redistricting. And so we're in a window that this redistricting needs to take place in time for the next election. And so we've actually got a fairly tight window, partly brought about because of the COVID and the problems that the Census Bureau had because of that. So things got delayed, and we're caught in this time frame of shorter period of time in order to do redistricting. I'm doing 5 other states. I'm getting more and more gray hair because of that, and certainly more airline miles than I'll ever want to have and use, more than likely, by doing all that traveling. So that's part of the parameters of what we're dealing with in terms of redistricting. Rhode Island is kind of unique. You guys have always been unique. That's what's always fun about working with you every 10 years. But looking at the population shifts that there are in the state, what we have in 2010 and 2020, the new data coming from the Census Bureau for 2020 shows, in fact, a marked reversal from what we had 10 years ago. 10 years ago, what we would find in the 2010 census is that the population was moving out of Providence area and moving to the south. Well, 10 years have passed, and there's been a significant shift. Instead of moving south, now people are moving north. They're coming out of the bay and out of that whole area down south and moving north or moving out of the state, unfortunately. So that dimension is causing some ripple effects going to take place in terms of redistricting. But you can see where particularly Narragansett lost the most number of people from 10 years ago. And so that's going to have an impact as we draw districts. We're going to focus a little bit on Newport County tonight to look at those more in depth so you can see that information. But from a broad sense, this is the pattern that we now have to deal with in dealing with redistricting in 2020. So just what has taken place from the past 10 years. That is going to cause some change to take place in terms of the districts. Indeed, because there are more people up north, all those districts up north have got too many people, and they're going to have to shift and give up some of those people so that the districts down south can move northward. So we're going to see some shifts going to take place. Cumberland, for example, is probably going to gain almost a half of a seat up in that neck of the woods. And so you've got circumstances where there will be some change. Warwick will end up losing, as well as what we said in terms of Narragansett. So this is going to shift everything in terms of some degree of representation. Some of it is not that big a change, but there will be ripple effects as we go forward with the districts. So just be cognizant from that side as we're moving forward. Here is what we're seeing for individual districts. This is for the state Senate. So you see that all the pink areas are those that are overpopulated. They're going to have to lose people to neighboring districts. All the gray areas are those that have lost people, and they're going to need to add territory to make up that difference. So you can see that there is some circumstances where there's going to have to be some significant changes. Providence area, you can see that a lot of those districts are much larger than and have too many people, so they're going to have to end up losing some of that. And down in South Kingston is also a significant factor that's coming into play. This will end up causing us to take a close look and look at each of the districts and get input from all of you in terms of what you think that means from representation standpoint. That will impact the state Senate, and it'll impact the state House. And so you'll end up can see how this change will take place. And let me also say that all of these graphs are either up on our website already or will be up there tonight, so that you'll be able to download, see these, look into them to your heart's content. So all of this information is there for everyone to make use of. So let's look in depth in terms of Newport. There is some interesting things that we have seen in terms of the data for Newport. What we've seen in terms of population change by census tract. Some interesting facts that come out to play. Indeed, Middletown is the one that's gotten the most shift going on, but it's within the town itself. So we're interested in why is that? What's going on here in Middletown? We didn't discover this until we started looking more in depth at the data. We've been looking with the commission in early meetings of looking at overall townships, but now we're starting to be able to see what's going on inside the towns and the cities. So you see that Middletown has got a big shift going on with some loss of the population in the eastern part of the town, but gains, rather significantly gains, 485 people on the western side of town. What's going on here? That's why we wanted to come and see and let people testify to tell us what is going on and what's happening here in the town. We can see some things in terms of the data, but we want to get your reactions and your thoughts on that. So population change is what's driving a lot of what we're going to be seeing and doing. We'll also be taking a look at voting potentials for the different racial groups. In Newport County, the biggest concentrations are of Hispanics and non-Hispanic African American.
Kim, if I can interrupt you for 1 second, are any
Yes.
of these charts that we're moving on to in our book? I found the first two a minute ago because our backs are to the
Right.
screen. I leafed through and I'm trying to follow you. You know what page? If these are in the book, would you just tell us what page?
These are not in the
These
in the
aren't
book.
in the book, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
They will be up on the website for everybody.
Okay.
But we were just producing these about an hour and a half ago.
It's in real time.
So,
Thank you. I
yep.
appreciate it.
So I apologize, but that's what we have for right now. But it is some things that are interesting to discover, certainly from the standpoint of the minority population. There is a lot more Hispanics in Newport and Middletown area than what we may have seen 10 years ago. Certainly around the naval base, as what we've always seen up in this neck of the woods. We have always seen for the last 30 years minority concentrations up there, partly because of the Navy base on that side. But that population was used to be African American, but now it's much more Hispanic on that side. And so that's this kind of change that's going on in Newport that is interesting and important to look at and discover and see what that means in terms of drawing districts. Now there's some weird shapes of some of these census blocks. This is down at the census block level. You see right along the coast here, there is the highest concentration of African Americans there. Well, shapes and numbers of people can be important. This census block has 3 people in them, of which 2 are African American. And so that's why you have that heavy dark blue coloring of that strange looking census block right there. So, you know, sometimes you got to look down in the data to see what kind of things are happening in that regard. But generally, shading can give you some clues of what's taking place. So it is important for us to take a look at. You can see down here at the bottom, we show for each of the towns what are the various concentrations of minorities there. Indeed, Newport's got 11.8% Hispanic on that side. You've got 5.45% for black, and yet Middletown has got a higher concentration of Asian here in Middletown. So you can start seeing some of the differences of what is going on. Clearly, you've got very much white population in Jamestown, Little Compton, and Tiverton. We've known that. It's always been that way. But this shows you some of the dichotomies in terms of some of the race questions that are there. It's not as great as what it is in Providence, obviously, but it is still gives us some clues and some information on that side. What we have also done is we've produced a series of maps, and we have copies of these maps down for people to take. We made 10 copies of each town. We're hoping that if there's different towns here, take your town's population. All of this data will be up on the website so that you can look in closely. The numbers are kind of small. I apologize, but trying to get everything on here, it tends to be a little bit small. But what is nice about the website is that you can zoom into the maps on the website and be able to see exactly in your area and your neighborhood how many people the Census Bureau counted in each census block. A census block is basically a territory bounded by some visible feature. In most of the cases in Johnston or Jamestown, you've got streets that depict that on that side. But when you get into Newport, there's a lot more census blocks here.
Kim, let me interrupt you for 1 second. If any members in the committee feel the need to get up, have a better angle so you don't get a kink in your neck and need a chiropractor, help
Yes.
yourself to go out and sit in the audience. There's a lot of free chairs there. I'm spun my chair around, and Bob and I need to talk, but if anyone wants to get up, help yourself, all right?
Yes, I apologize. That is certainly a possibility, so you can look at these. But by all means, also, go and look at the website because you'll see a lot more information there. And certainly if you live in this county, look at your particular town, because what we are interested in is having you in the general public look at this data and tell us, does it make sense? Does it make sense for your area that you live in? And is it correct? Do you think the Census Bureau counted the right number of people? A lot of these blocks are very small, and therefore, if you live in that area, you probably know how many people are in that census block because they're your neighbors.
If you would you just, for the edification of the public, would you explain again how we came up with these census blocks, the various shapes, how the Census Bureau did it?
Sure. The Census Bureau, what they do in terms of census blocks is that they look at what's called visible features. So a visible feature in the most common sense, like what you're seeing here, are streets. The street is what defines the census block. There are four corners or four sides of a street, basically, from a block standpoint. And so it is those people that are inside the bounding streets. It's not the people that live on the other side of that street. It's the people that are inside that geographic space. And so that's important to recognize. It is also governed by other visible features. For example, streams or railroads or other water features or anything that an enumerator can see when they come knocking on the door. Kim Brace, are you there? You didn't fill out the census. We want to know, how many people there are here or whatever. They can see where this house is located as it relates to those visible features. Now, the one kicker on the visible features is that there are many times invisible lines that also govern census blocks. And the most common that happens here in New England is your town boundaries. And those are invisible features. Sometimes they are the streets, but many times they're not. And so those invisible features will also govern census blocks. So it's looking at all of that kind of information and that kind of data, but it's important for us, for you to take a look at this and tell us, do you think the Census Bureau counted the right number of people? Because that's been the big question over the last 8 months as we're starting to see data coming from the Census Bureau. Remember, the Census Bureau was caught because of COVID, and they were caught because of all the friction that was going on in this country with the Trump administration wanting to count citizens or not count citizens, depending upon where they were. So all of that turmoil was what was going on, but it was more the COVID that caused all of the functions that the Bureau had planned out to suddenly get delayed. And it was delayed for a bunch of different months. So that timetable changed the dimension of when the Census Bureau could find people and count them. Traditionally, they've looked at April 1st. Where did you live on April 1st? Well, if you think back to April 1st of 2020, COVID had just hit. The colleges were just let out, and who knew when they were going to come back? So certainly colleges, and you'll see that in the data, they were very hard hit. And was the Bureau able to count the number of college kids and where they were? That may be what's causing the problem in what we're seeing in Narragansett, for example. So it's all of those kind of factors that came into play in trying to understand the numbers and do they make sense. But we really want you to look at that and look at it closely from the general public standpoint to tell us. And that's why we've created these maps, so that you can look at your individual town and take a look. Here's Middletown. Well, you know, remember what I was saying is that all this western side has lost people, over almost 500 and something, as I recall, all in this eastern side of the town. While the western side, and particularly the census tract that is anchored right here, has suddenly been the most experience of growth in Newport County. Why is that? We were looking at aerial photography this afternoon to try to depict, now that we know the street patterns. All of those streets were there in 2010. But it does appear that they may have been naval housing. Were they occupied in 2010 and subsequently were added to, and you know, more people got into those housing units there? And is that why you've got 452 more people in this census tract? I don't know. You know, but if you live in this neck of the woods in Middletown, come and tell us. Let us know what you've seen and what you experienced, so that we can try to understand some of the data. That's part of the key, that trying to figure out drawing of districts is so much governed by, let the data tell the story. So we're asking, and we're going out in public hearings to show this information to you, so that you can come and talk to us and reflect upon it and give us your thoughts. What did you see? What did you see in terms of the data? Was it correct? That's the real question that we have. So we've created maps for each town, and so you can see Portsmouth here. What is, you know, what's the population? You'll see that this one didn't come through very well for the projector wise, but it is the full map of the full town, and you can see all of the territory and all of the census blocks. And again, you can zoom down into these from on the web. So if you can't see and can't properly, you know, read those numbers, you can zoom down on the website, so you can look more closely at them. And Tiverton and all of that, and Little Compton, you know, what is going on in these towns to see now in both on here on the islands. You're not seeing a lot of change taking place, but it is important to understand what's going on in that regard. So we've produced these maps, and we will continue to produce these in all of our public hearings and for each town around the state, so that you can look closely at the data on that side. Now, when the software gets up so that everybody can use it, you'll be able to zoom in and see these numbers too on the software, so that you'll be able to see what the data is showing. So all of this is up on our website, redistricting.org. This is our website, and we can link to it, providing my internet capability is still there. Of course, I had two monitors before. Maybe it's trying to tell me it's over on the other one. But just go to redistricting.org, and you'll see our website and be able to see what it shows and the information. You can end up signing up there for information. We've got a way of putting in your email address, and we will send you information. So it's a way that we can communicate with you, and we want to be able to get you to communicate with us. So that's all on redistricting.org. I was holding down. There we go. This is the website. This is what you'll be able to get to and see for the purposes. And here's our information. Put in your email address, submit it to us, If you want us to be able to tell you when districts have changed your district, just check that box, and that's a way that we'll be able to have your address. And when districts get changed, we'll be able to send you an email that, hey, this is what it's looking like. So that's one thing that you can do and submit that to us. Here is a way to participate in the process. We talked about being able to draw communities of interest, and I'll get back to that. But this page gives you a lot of information there, and ultimately creating a district plan yourself will be able to be done there. We're testing that out. It's some new pieces of software, but we're double checking to make sure that it's gonna provide the right information. It is a little bit difficult to use sometimes, and so that's why we want to be able to have some training for everybody from the public as well as the members. And so we're asking to sign up and send us an email and give us a call. And if you're in the public, you'll be able to come into the state capitol building, and we'll have a monitor and a terminal there in the state library. Just sign up to let us know, and we'll have somebody up there to be able to man that when you come in. We've got a lot of data already there. Some of the maps that we showed you tonight are there. We'll have all of this PowerPoint, and these other maps will be here too. So you can end up seeing some of the data that we've seen and that we've been sharing with the commission over the last several weeks on that side. This gives you a calendar of what we're going to be doing and where we're going to be meeting, so you can look at and see where in each county we're going to have public hearings. And if you can't join us, you can watch it. So our hats off to Capitol TV that is broadcasting these. And the videotape of even tonight will be up there that you can go and watch later on. So all of those kind of presentations are there. And the PowerPoints that are being proposed and looked at, this PowerPoint tonight, you'll have up there too. So all of this videos will be there for your edification. And if you've got sleepless nights, you can turn it on for what the heck is. On that side. So there is this redistricting site. As we say, it will be continuously updating. And so come back and visit us frequently. Here's the contact information. This is our phone number there in the office. This is where you can send an email to contact us and be able to ask questions or find out where you can go on that side, and when you can come in. You know, we've got some space here for you can send us information, and we'll be able to get messages from you from this website. So all of this is there on riredistricting.org. It's for everybody's benefit to be able to see what's going on an ongoing basis. So, riredistricting.org. I'll say that thousands of times, I'm sure. As I said, the communities of interest is what we have a desire for you to start making use of. And we have created a user's guide. There are, I think, 15, 20 copies of the user guide here. And Ryan is passing those out to anybody on how you can go and make use of the My Redistricting site and be able to go into communities of interest on that side. So if we go back to Indeed on the website, this is where you can go into the website, and this is how you can set up communities of interest. We just tested this to test out, but you'll have a map of the entire state. You can zoom into it and put in what you believe to be your neighborhood or your communities of interest, depending upon what you think you want to look at. You can, as you zoom in, you'll see townships. There's different levels of geography that appear when you are zoomed in. Township levels show up at level 13. When you go down to level 15, there's precincts. So they show up, the voting precincts on that side. So you can zoom around at this level and see the voting precinct that you might vote in and what its boundaries are on that side. And if you go in further, you'll end up going down to census blocks. And this is the kind of information that we were just showing you in terms of the census blocks. Now, this site doesn't have the population numbers on it. That will be in the other site. So the communities of interest is really just a guide to where you might want to say to us, hey, this is my community, and I want to add a community of interest. Click that button, and you can end up drawing that community of interest of your neighborhood that you want to tell us about. And by simply going like this and closing the loop, it'll bring up a filled in or information that you can define what your community of interest is. Tell us a little bit about that community of interest. Give us your full name, your email, and phone number. We're asking for the email because what happens is that when you hit submit on this, it will go out and send a confirmation to you on your email.
Kim, let me stop you for a minute. Chairman Phillips has a question.
Kim,
Yes, sir.
speaking of the communities of interest, somebody wants to put in a community of interest. How do we verify that is a true community of interest instead of just encasing certain sections of the community itself? And are we supposed to verify the community of interest?
Very good question. Community of interests are basically in the minds of the people. There are some towns that have defined communities themselves. The planning department, for example, in Providence, has communities of interest in their planning document. So they've helped define that. Now, even if you live in Providence, you may have a little bit different definition of what the planning department put in. But that's the kind of information that we want to get. We've worked with communities of interest for a number of decades. You will see people having different ideas on Elmwood neighborhood. And, you know, my thought is it goes down to this street. Somebody else's thought is that it goes over to that street. That can be useful. Sometimes it can be confusing, yes. But indeed, by letting people tell us what their definition of communities of interest, we'll be able to see that, and we can take some of that into account as we're drawing districts. That's the heart of what we're trying to do in letting people see and tell us their neighborhoods. But yes, indeed, there may be conflicts sometimes in that regard. So add the community of interest. When you do, you'll end up then, I didn't hit save, but it will be there, and we can go, for example, here and look at what an earlier test that I had done. So all of that information, it will be along the side here where you and the general public can see what other people might see in that regard. So all of this kinds of information is very useful for us to understand and for you to understand. There are different ways of looking at maps on this. You could end up flipping and seeing a dark side map or a night map or a retro map or a silver map, road maps. There's a lot of different map styles here, and you just select which ones you want to see. You know, you get down close and you begin to see building footprints of what the houses or the buildings look like. So you can really look at your particular neighborhood and see where these are. Now, here's an excellent example of a census block, block 3028. Notice it is all the people that live on the outside of that census block. It's not the people that live on the other side of the street or on the south side of the street here. Census blocks are defined by those visible features. And you can really see that when you've got the building footprints that are showing up on this kind of map. So that's a good clue for you in terms of what's the data. And basically the census block is the lowest level of geography for us to draw with. So you can't split a census block. So this is what we're going to end up drawing with and what you'll have in the My Districting site too. But this is what is the census block, and this is what the data is that we get from the Census Bureau. So there's a lot of different things that are here. There's a Show Me How button here that starts up a 4-minute introduction to the Communities of Interest site. So you can click on there and watch it. And it'll take you through the process that I just took you through. But if you want a refresher course, this is the place to go. So all of that is here. You can put in your address and it'll take you right to it on what your address is. I want to ask members to put in their address on the video here, but take a look at where your address is and make sure that it's putting you in the right direction on that side. So that is all in the My Districting site and part of the Communities of Interest ways of dealing with that. And all of that is on right there on the page. And that 4-page brochure that we've handed out tonight is right here. So you can print it off yourself at home on that regard. So that's certainly from the standpoint of looking at this information and what is there. That's that 4-page document. And then coming soon, we'll be putting up the site so that you can draw your own district ideas. We're testing some of that out, but certainly give us a call. In the general public, come on in and see us. We'll train you on it. We're starting to train legislators too when they come in to see us so that they can get on it. So certainly we're trying to be as transparent as possible for everybody to make use of and see the information that's there. So with that, we want to hear your stories. We'd like to hear your comments.
Senator Felag.
Kim, that was a very good presentation, but I think we were missing one component, one important component. We talked about the map of Newport County and the population shifts on each of those particular communities. And is it true that the overall population of Rhode Island increased by almost close to 45,000?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so now what's another important component is that because of the fact that the population of Rhode Island increased by 44,800 people, something close to 45,000, it means that each of the senatorial districts, which there are 38 of them, and 75 of the House representatives have to increase their median by that amount. So in other words, if you divide 38 into 44,000, you're going to end up getting 1,200, almost close to 1,200, and you're going to get maybe 600 from the House districts. So that means that their median has to also increase. So when we're looking at the decrease in population, that's only one component. The other component is the fact that the median has increased by that amount, which means that you have that wiggle room, as you mentioned last time, of 5% plus or minus, but it still dictates the fact that these districts are going to have to be a little bit larger.
Yes,
Correct?
you are correct. Indeed, the districts will end up being slightly larger. And so all of that is taken into account. And that is what redistricting is all about, looking at what is the ideal population today or in this decade as opposed to 10 years ago. And that shift is being reflected in that creation of the ideal district size that then each district is gauged against. So it was a shift, as you said, of 44,000 this decade compared to 10 years ago. And so each district will get somewhat larger than it was before. All of that kind of information is part of those tables that I gave you at your very first meeting. And all of those tables for the general public are what's up on our website. So you can go there and take a look at that information. Each and every district is documented there in how underpopulated or overpopulated it is. And so you'll be able to see that in the data that's out there on the website.
Yeah, I just want people to realize that important aspect, because when you look at the map and you see populations, you say, well, my community increased by 5% or 3% or 2%, another community went down, but overall, your district size may have to increase based on that median aspect of it.
Yes, that is correct. That is one of the key. And the other key is that it varies across the state. And it will ripple across the state. So that where we may have to increase the populations in the towns and the counties in the south, they'll have to decrease that population threshold up north. And that fundamental shift is what will govern all of the change that takes place in the state.
Thank you, Senator. Rep Diaz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brace, based on the information provided by you in every single hearing, that some of the districts, House districts, increase population, and applying the definition of community of interest, there will be districts that keeping the community interest will be difficult, because in order to reduce the size of that district, you have to consider into maybe shape the community interest in a specific district. How or what do we apply in those cases where you have to do that, or we have to do that?
That's a very good question. Community of interest may run counter to your thought of how many people make up a district in a town. We can't accommodate all of the communities that maybe are there, or we have to go outside of the town. It's going to be a functioning movement of information that we have that we want to get from the members of the public and members of the legislature to help guide that process and give us a clue on what's the best way of creating the districts. But certainly communities of interest is one way of gathering that information.
Thank you, Rep. At this time, are there any questions from any other members of our committee for Kim before we open it up to public comment? Anybody have any questions, any thoughts? We still have a long way to go, so there was a lot of information, Kim, as usual, very
As usual,
detailed.
yes, yes.
I'd ask if everyone would just come back up. We'll open it up to public comment in a second as soon as everybody gets back up. Thank you.